Hey, moms, I am so glad you're here today. Today, my guest is amazing. Her name is Tricia Taylor, and we're going to be talking about surrendering the secret. Stay tuned. Hello, moms. Welcome to the Front Parking Spot podcast. I am so glad you're here. I'm Jennifer Bosma, wife, mom, grandma, former teacher for 23 years, and now a Christian children's book author and your podcast host. Are you a faith-based mom trying to live out a Christian life for your family? Do you want to learn more ways that you can have power over your child's spiritual growth? Inside this podcast, you will find tried and true ideas to grow in your faith and be the best wife and mom you can be. So listen in as you're cleaning up, doing the drive, or matching that sock, and be encouraged to know that God has his front parking spot set aside for you. Hello, and welcome to the Front Parking Spot podcast. I'm so glad you're here. A lot of you know that I have been working in a pregnancy center as a volunteer consultant. It has been amazing, and I like to kind of tell people that I first got into that from my first book, The Baby Garden. And The Baby Garden is based on Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Well, the cool part about The Baby Garden is that I wrote a little backstory here. I wrote it in 1994 when I was expecting my second baby. And I love to explain, it's kind of like my way with the baby garden, how to explain where babies come from, that God has a plan for every child. He's known you from the beginning of time. And I would like to tell, when I was pregnant at the time, my 2-year-old daughter, I would tell her, well, the baby's coming from the baby garden. And so we talked about your talents you learn in the baby garden, then the Lord sends you to your mom and dad, and then you're born. So anyways, that is kind of like the whole kind of like quick story of my first book, The Baby Garden. But what's cool about it is really great for siblings, and when an older child is expecting a sibling. Well, after that book was published, my friend, who was a volunteer at a pregnancy center, she said, Jennifer, this book would be so good in a pregnancy center, because a lot of times women are in the waiting room and they're just really kind of contemplating. They're facing unplanned pregnancy for whatever reasons, friends with benefits, we've heard them all, or just like someone who just got pregnant and they were not expecting it, and definitely an unplanned pregnancy. So when she told me that my book could actually be in the waiting room of a pregnancy center, it really excited me that my book could possibly be a tool for a mom that would be right on the table when she walked in, maybe thumbing through it and kind of seeing like, wait, I don't have a plan for my baby, but God does. So where I'm telling you this story from is this is how I got involved in pregnancy center. And the cool part is the baby garden. My ministry for that book was to get it in every state, at least 2 pregnancy centers per state. So I had a list, of the alphabet from Alaska down to West Virginia. I think that was the last one. And so I would kind of cold call and say, hey, would you like a copy of my book? And they would answer yes. And then I would send them a copy of my book. And so it's in at least 2 pregnancy centers in every state. So that was kind of how the ministry started, with me going into a pregnancy center. So fast forward, going to First Care Women's Clinic, I went into my little area women's clinic here, brought them my book, and then I said I would love to volunteer. So that is why I am volunteering in a pregnancy center, to hopefully give a mom help. And we're going to be talking about the healing part of this in just a minute. So that is how I started going in the ministry. And my heart was very open to this, because I remember when I was a sophomore in college, my best friend called me up and had that conversation with her, and she told me she was pregnant. And I didn't know really what to say. I knew I was pro-life because I am the baby of 4, and my sister, who's 9 years older than me, she had been a nurse, and she was always that little voice in my ear saying, oh my goodness, if you ever get pregnant, never have an abortion. Because she had actually, I found out later, had witnessed one when she was in nursing school, and it traumatized her very much. So she was my advocate. She was my voice in my ear about, being pro-life. But when my friend called and told me her parents were very Catholic, She didn't want them to know that she had been having sex. She had the whole shame thing. She didn't tell them that she was pregnant. And I told my friend what everyone seems to tell: whatever you do, I will support you. And so 2 days later, she called me back and she had had the abortion. So we never talked about it. It was pushed under the rug. I think she ended up marrying the guy, and she ended up having 4 kids later. And he has since passed away, and we still hadn't talked about it. She was in my wedding. I was in her wedding. It was just something that wasn't discussed. And when I started thinking about my book and pregnancy centers, I knew that I had this kind of guilt that I wasn't an advocate for life. When my friend called me up, I could have said, tell your parents, they will 100% be supportive to you, but I didn't. And I find out now in the pregnancy centers that is very true. And so many people are like, well, if it works for you, whatever you want to do, I would never have an abortion, but whatever you want to do, you do you. Anyways, fast forward, my guest here is one of my dearest friends. We have gotten so close in the almost 3 years working at the pregnancy center. And she is my friend, Tricia Taylor. And Tricia leads our pregnancy center's abortion recovery, whole therapy and counseling. And she leads these women because she has her story to tell. And she is near and dear to my heart. And I wanted to have her on the Front Parking Spot podcast because you may know of someone, either you or a friend, who has had an abortion and needs the healing. And like my friend, she didn't tell anybody. And it was just me and her husband, who's now deceased. And I told her to get some help. And that was liberating for my friend. It was something like 40 years. So I'd like to introduce to you Tricia Taylor, and she is going to tell you a little bit about herself and what she does at the clinic. Welcome, Tricia.
Thank you, Jennifer. I am so glad to be here. And ditto, Jennifer is one of my dearest friends. So thank you for having me. And I'll start off with just a short story about how I ended up here. I loved hearing yours in detail, but how I ended up at the Pregnancy Resource Center was I had an abortion when I was 17, and everybody around me was saying, you got to have an abortion. You got to have an abortion. There was no one there saying, you can do this. Tell your parents. And just like Jennifer was talking about, I didn't tell my parents because I was too embarrassed, ashamed. I thought they would kick me out. We hear that a lot at the center. And we usually say, well, they'll be mad at you or disappointed maybe, but they will probably eventually realize this is their grandchild and come around. But anyway, I didn't go that route. And so I had an abortion, and nobody to this day tells women what they are going to go through after the abortion, and that it is traumatic. And it really doesn't matter which type you have, surgical or the pill. Although I will say in today's environment, most women are having the pill. They're having, them done fairly early. And it's the most traumatic stories that I hear. And they advertise it as, oh, it's just a pill. You take it it's like an over-the-counter pill. And you're just going to have some heavy cramping and go home and everything's going to be fine. Well, it's not. That's not how it is. So I just am thrilled to use my story. And my story was a 10-year really self-destructive lifestyle that I had no idea related back to the abortion I had had. And it was some 20 years later when I finally put that all together, when I went into some counseling and I did a timeline of my life, and I saw where when I was 17 and had that abortion, my life just spiraled down for 10 years after that. So it was a really clear visual that those were connected. So then I started volunteering like Jennifer, went to a pregnancy resource and center and they said, well, we would love for you to volunteer, but since you've had an abortion, you have to go through our healing class. And of course, in my mind, I thought, I don't need that, but okay, and of course I found out I did need that. And I found out a lot about post-abortion syndrome, which they didn't have a name for it when I had my abortion, but basically abortion causes PTSD in women, and they call it different names now. It does have a name, post-abortion syndrome. There's some other acronyms for it, but basically it's PTSD. So one of the things that I do at our clinic is I help women that have been through abortion go through the healing process. And we have a class that we take them through and just to tell them, let them see that God wants you healed, that God understands. He forgave you the first, if they're Christian, we say he forgave you the first time you asked him. And, now you have to forgive yourself. You have to go through that process of healing and forgive yourself. And then what we hope from that, and I probably have told you this before, Jennifer, but, a long time ago when I started doing this, God said he was raising up an army of women that would dispel the lie of abortion.
Oh, yes.
And what does the enemy do? He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So, abortion is part of that. And so it's just filled with lies because, of course, he's the father of lies. And so that's what we hope. We hope they get free and then they go out and they may just have a person come to them and that they can tell them, no, don't do this. This is why. And here's a place you can go. Here's some help you can get because, we have a lot of resources.
Yes. And, can you tell our listeners what are the typical symptoms of that PTSD?
Yeah, well, it can be anything that if you think about, the soldiers, or whoever, that's what I typically think of the soldiers. But it can be most women, well, I put them into two categories. Most women will walk out of the abortion clinic, as I did, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to think about this. I'm never going to talk about it.
Pushing under the rug.
Yep. And you suppress it, and you don't realize that it's coming out in all kinds of different ways. And every time it comes up, you push it back down. Other women will get triggered. It might be a friend that, gets pregnant or, somebody talking about abortion. Or I always use this as an extreme example, but I had a person one time that worked in the neonatal unit at a hospital.
Right.
She could not go back to her job because every time she walked and looked at those little babies in the neonatal unit, she fell apart.
Yeah.
And some have a mixture of both, but and there's all these statistics. It's so hard to get statistics on abortion and abortion recovery but I will just say, in my experience, there's a lot of different statistics out there, but in my experience, every woman I've ever met that went through abortion has some type of PAS, post-abortion syndrome, or has had it. And it varies, mine was probably more extreme because it went on so long, but I think it affects every woman.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I know so many women these days have anxiety. And I think, and they're like, they can't sleep at night, they have anxiety, they're depressed, they're suicidal, and they don't know what's hindering them because they think they've pushed it under the rug. And we've heard this from from so many clients that have come in. And the other thing, Tricia, that the devil loves to do is keep it in secret.
Yes.
Because when you keep it in secret, he just likes to fester it and have it just really kind of eat at the person. So when they come to your classes and they get that freedom from that. Now, what program, if you, we'll in our show notes, we'll have ways that you can connect with us. But for the woman who just wants to kind of keep it low key, what can she do if she does need this help? Where can she go? And she lives in Nebraska, per se, or somewhere.
Well, there are different post-abortion organizations. I am particularly certified with Surrendering the Secret. They have a website. This is Pat Layton is the author. She actually lives here, so I just went up to her house to get some books yesterday. But she has a program, and it's called Surrendering the Secret. And it is, if you do it in a group, it's an 8-week class. So it really goes in depth. And I do recommend, if you can get in a group, in person, that is the best. And I know to a lot of women, that's a scary thought, walking into a room and it's usually a small group. Like for us, it's 6 to 8 women. But I know that can be intimidating, but there's just something about that group dynamic where they all help each other heal.
Right.
And there's something healing about them hearing each other's stories and when what they went through, because you're right. The enemy keeps women in bondage.
Right.
And they think I'm the only one. I remember when I became a Christian after that 10-year destructive lifestyle I was living, I was sitting in church thinking I'm the only woman in here that's had an abortion, and I'm not telling these sweet little church ladies I've had an abortion.
Right.
But of course, really, that's another lie.
Yes.
Unfortunately, what's in the culture is in the church, and, it's probably the woman that's sitting right next to you, or either, the one next to her,
Right.
it's really to that extent.
And CareNet said that CareNet is an organization, a pro-life organization that walks alongside pregnancy center resources and is a great resource for women that are facing an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah.
But they said 1 out of 4 women in church on Sunday will have an abortion appointment scheduled for that week. And they can be church-going women. And some of them are married women, which I thought was, when I learned the statistics, was very shocking.
Yes.
Because, and we would tell people in the pregnancy center too, that sibling is the best gift that you can give your children, even if it's number 4. I'm number 4. I'm so glad my mom chose life and had me. But the best thing you can give your child is a sibling. And life's about no regrets, and you will never regret having that baby.
Yeah, I think what we say, I'm sure you've said it too, is that, I always say, we have women come back all the time showing us their babies, and they're so happy. Never had one that had an abortion say she was glad she had it.
No, and you know what I love? And we were actually, Trish and I were both there. We got to go and we got to see Abby Johnson.
Yes.
And it was through 40 Days for Life here in Marietta, Georgia. Abby Johnson came. And if you have not watched the Unplanned movie, I believe it's on Amazon Prime for either free or like $2.99. But the Abby Johnson movie is a great movie on a woman who was raised in a Christian home. And her testimony was her parents never talked about abortion. They never talked. She was in Christian homes. She was at Christian camp. She went to church every week. She was doing all the things. But then she went to Texas A&M, which my daughter went to, and it's super conservative. And she went to Texas A&M, and she was on a campus thing, a campus little I don't know, like a little festival or whatever. And there was Planned Parenthood there. And she had never heard of Planned Parenthood. And they kind of came to her like, do you want to help women? And she goes, well, of course I want to help women. Long story short, and you can read her bio, but she ended up becoming a Planned Parenthood director for 8 years, was it? 8 years. And she said in her testimony that she was responsible for over facilitating 20,000 abortions. She was not the doctor, but she was talking about how Planned Parenthood would kind of teach them real quick to do procedures, and they weren't even like medically safe. But her story, unplanned, and she had 2 chemical abortions, and she shows how terrible that is. It's not just a heavy period. And now she is married. The veil was lifted. She's married now, and she has 8 children. So her mission in life is to witness to the abortion worker, to expose them, because she had that veil forever. She was just kind of like not looking at the truth. But we got to go to see her too. So there's so much help out there for women.
Yeah, there is. And I love how God is really, and it's all God, he's putting different people in different places to help women. It's Abby Johnson. She helps not only women in crisis pregnancies. I believe it's Loveline.
Yes,
the
Loveline.
You can call hotline,
and
if you're in a crisis pregnancy
and
center.
That's for money. They will actually help women get cars that are like, I cannot have this baby because I can't fit my car seat. I don't have space for another car seat. So it's boots on the ground.
And a lot of the pregnancy resource centers do that. I know we give financial aid, we call them and try to give financial aid or help in whatever way we can. But then if we don't, we have other organizations. So there's tentacles everywhere. But Abby Johnson has really helped the people that are coming out of the abortion.
Right. The workers.
Yes, the workers.
Oh, yeah.
Abortion workers. And, when they start to realize what they are involved in. And so it's just amazing. And then we've got doctors that, used to do abortions coming out, and they're talking about it. And I think for me, the mission is just one woman at a time.
Yes.
If one woman at a time gets healed, then she's free to tell another woman, and that might prevent that woman from going through the trauma of abortion.
Right.
So, and kind of, I realized I didn't go into detail, but part of my story, that 10-year self-destructive lifestyle, I had a lot of those PTSD symptoms. I drank, I just self-medicated, didn't know why I was doing it. I was promiscuous, and that is actually one of the symptoms of post-abortion syndrome. It is promiscuity, or you're either the other way. You never want to have sex again. But most women, they will start living this self-destructive lifestyle, and they don't know why.
Right.
And it can be eating disorders. You just look at PTSD and the list of that. A lot of them are hidden, like, the eating disorders and things like that. You wouldn't necessarily relate that to, oh, I had an abortion. A lot of women have tried to commit suicide afterwards. So then that's really sad. But it's a long, long list, but I think a lot of women that we talk to, because, you guys always call me in at the end to talk to them, they don't even realize that they have it. But then once I start talking about it, you see their heads start shaking. You're like, oh, that's what I'm dealing with. That's what's going on. And,
Well, yeah. And I may say to them, like, you'll see in their history that they've had an abortion or more than one abortion. And then like, well, how are you doing with that? Oh, I'm fine. I've moved on, blah, blah, blah. I'm fine. And then when you give them the pregnancy loss survey, I would say, Tricia, they lit this up like a Christmas tree. So many checks on areas that they're dealing with and struggling with. And yes, so your ministry is amazing. So moms out there, all of us have known somebody that has had an abortion, whether it's, directly related or somewhere, yourself, a friend, a relative. So it is very important to not push it under the rug and to really ask them if they're getting help, because they probably are not. Like my friend, who I think was 35 or 40 years afterwards, she said no one knew. She never got help, and she just takes it out of her mind. And hopefully that she has gone and done the Surrender the Secret or reached out to her pregnancy resource center. There are so many people out there that can help you. And that's one thing we will have in the show notes. We'll have some resources that you can tap into. You can reach out to me. I can directly connect you with people as well. I can connect you with Tricia. Tricia will have your email that they can reach out to you. But do you have any other parting notes to moms that are listening that they know someone that needs this help?
I think I would just say, usually by this time, maybe not right after, but several months or a year or whatever, you realize the lie of abortion and that it was not an easy fix. So I would just say to women, don't sit there and suffer, because that is what keeps you in bondage. Go and find an organization like ours, Surrender the Secret, or a pregnancy resource center like Jennifer said, and ask them for help. And because the lie, again, and one of the lies entangled in abortion is that, oh, if I just don't talk about it, then that's going to
goes away.
All I need to do. Yeah, it'll go away. But it's quite the opposite. It's really talking about it and to get it up and out, to heal, and that brings you freedom. Freedom is the word. And I think you mentioned that at the beginning. It really is freedom, and it can't hold you. I went from never talking about my abortion for 20 years to now, I'm sitting here with you
and like
on a
daily
podcast.
At the pregnancy center, right? And yes, and that's the thing too, because the people that have gone through it, their story with the women who are facing that unplanned pregnancy, when you come into my clients and you tell them your story, it really radiates, and they can really hear you because you've been there.
Yes.
You have so much more credibility. And you have the truth that will set them free, so. Yes. Well, moms, thank you for listening in. Thank you for reaching out. And also, please share this podcast with other women that you think that can benefit from healing with a previous abortion, that they can have that post-abortion recovery. Thank you, Tricia, for being here. You've been such a blessing.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're a blessing.
Well, mamas, thank you so much for joining in. I know you are super busy doing all the things that can consume your day, but you took a couple of minutes to learn how God wants to build you up in your faith, family, and life, and He wants to applaud you for this. Please subscribe and review my show. This helps other moms tune in as well. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at Front Parking Spot, on Facebook at Front Parking Spot Mom Community, or my website at jenniferbosma.com. Have an Ephesians 3:20 type of day, mamas, and be encouraged as you go for the front parking spot in your life today. God bless.